The air in the Grand Beaumont ballroom was thick with the scent of money and expensive perfume. A glittering sea of silks and tailored suits. It was the annual Founders Gala, a night where the city's elite gathered to congratulate themselves. On their philanthropy, their champagne flutes held aloft like tiny, bubbling trophies. Into this polished world walked Irana, a ghost from another reality. She wore a simple, faded olive-drab jacket, its fabric softened by 1,000 washings and a history no one in the room could ever guess. It was clean, meticulously so, but in this context of opulent display, it was an object of profound and immediate scorn. Her hair was tied back without fanfare, and her face, etched with lines of a life lived far from the soft glow of chandeliers, was calm and observant. She moved with a quiet dignity that was, in itself, an affront to the performative clamor of the room. A story like this is a reminder that the most profound strength is often silent, and true honor is worn not on a lapel, but in the heart. If you believe that we should look beyond the surface, take a moment to subscribe to our channel for more stories that touch the soul. Irana's presence was a stone dropped into a placid pond, and the ripples of disdain were immediate. They began with Cordelia Blackwood, a woman whose family name was emblazoned on half the buildings in the city, and whose sense of self-worth was directly proportional to the price tag of her gown. She saw Irana and her lip curled in a sneer, so practiced it was almost elegant. She leaned into her circle of friends, her voice a venomous whisper. "My God, look at that," she hissed, not bothering to be truly discreet. "Did someone leave the service entrance unlocked? I thought this was a private event." 8. Her companions, an audience of designer-clad sycophants, tittered obediently.
Ow.
Their eyes flickered towards Irana, their gazes like tiny, sharp pebbles. Irana heard them. She felt their judgment wash over her, a familiar and icy tide. She did not flinch. She simply found a quiet spot near a row of historical photographs detailing the city's founding fathers. Her hands tucked into the pockets of her worn jacket, the jacket felt like a second skin, a source of comfort and a shield. Inside, her fingers traced the frayed edge of a pocket lining, a small grounding motion that kept the world at bay. The murmuring continued, growing bolder as Irana's passivity was mistaken for weakness. Cordelia, ever the queen bee, decided to escalate. She glided across the floor, a shimmering shark in a sea of guppies. Positioning herself near Irana under the pretense of admiring the photographs. "It's simply amazing what they let in these days," she said, her voice loud enough to carry. "One would think a certain standard would apply. This isn't a shelter." A few nervous chuckles echoed her cruelty. Irana's gaze remained. On a black and white photo of a stern-faced man with a formidable mustache, she didn't grant Cordelia the satisfaction of a reaction. To the room, she was a statue of social inadequacy. But within her, a quiet storm raged, not of anger, but of memory. Each whisper, each scornful glance, was a pale echo of far worse things she had endured. This room, with its manufactured drama and superficial cruelty, was nothing. It was a playpen. She had survived the wilderness. Her silence was not submission. It was a fortress. She had learned long ago that the loudest voices often have the least to say. Her focus was on a small, almost unnoticeable patch on her jacket's left sleeve. It was a circle of dark blue cloth, the color of twilight, with a single hand stitched silver flower at its center. A nightshade was faded and unassuming, easily mistaken for a simple, folksy decoration. But it was not a decoration. It was a covenant. It was a promise made in blood and darkness, under a sky lit only by explosions. It was a symbol of a sisterhood of saviors who walked into hell to pull soldiers from its grasp. In her quiet contemplation was interrupted by a shift in the room's atmosphere. A wave of respect and deference parted the crowd as a man in a crisp, dark suit made his way through. He was older, with silver hair and a posture that spoke of decades of command. This was Colonel Julian Vance, the evening's guest of honor and a celebrated war hero. His eyes, keen and intelligent, swept the room with a practiced air of observation. Cordelia immediately saw her opportunity, detaching from her circle to intercept him. "Colonel," she purred, placing a hand on his arm. Cordelia Blackwood. Such an honor to have you. The colonel offered a polite but distant smile. A pleasure, Miss Blackwood. His gaze, however, continued to move. Assessing, reading the room. It passed over the glittering gowns and expensive suits. And then it found Irana at first. Colonel Vance's expression registered the same thing as everyone else's. A simple woman, out of place. His eyes noted the drab jacket, the plain hair, the quiet solitude. He was about to look away, to return his attention to the cloying Ms. Blackwood, when something caught his professional eye. A detail. It was the small, circular patch on her sleeve. His polite smile faltered. His eyes narrowed, a laser focus cutting through the ballroom's haze. He took an involuntary step forward, pulling his arm from Cordelia's grasp without even noticing. She was left standing there, her mouth slightly agape, instantly forgotten. The colonel's world had suddenly shrunk to the space occupied by the woman in the old jacket. The patch, that faded blue circle, that simple silver flower. He had not seen one in 30 years. Not since the mud and the fire and the screams of the Kenner Ridge Valley. He froze. His hand, which had been reaching for a glass of water from a passing tray, stopped midair. The blood drained from his face. The noisy ballroom, the music, the chatter, all dissolved into a dull, distant roar. The only thing that was real was the patch. A gasp, sharp and audible, escaped his lips. People nearby turned, noticing the decorated hero's sudden dramatic shift. A hush began to spread from that epicenter, a wave of confused silence rippling through the crowd. Cordelia stared, utterly bewildered by the turn of events. The colonel began to walk. His steps were no longer the easy stride of a guest of honor, but the measured, deliberate pace of a soldier on holy ground. He moved toward Irena, his eyes locked on her sleeve, his face a mask of awe, disbelief, and a dawning terrible reverence. He walked right past Cordelia, who stood like a statue of obsolete vanity. He stopped a foot in front of Irana, who finally looked up from the historical photographs, her calm gray eyes meeting his. The entire room was now watching, a theater of the bewildered. The colonel's voice, when he spoke, was a ragged whisper, choked with an emotion that silenced every last corner of the grand hall. That patch, he breathed, his finger slightly raised, as if afraid to touch it, to profane it. The silver nightshade, my God, the nightshade medics. He looked. From the patch to her face, truly seeing her for the first time, they told us. They told us, none of you ever made it out. Irana's expression softened, a flicker of shared sorrow and understanding passing between them. For the first time that evening, she spoke to someone. Her voice was low, clear and steady, carrying in the profound silence. Some of us did. Colonel, she gave a small, sad nod. We just learned to be quiet about it. The simplicity of her words landed with the force of a physical blow. The colonel's eyes welled with tears. He snapped to attention, his back ramrod straight, his heels clicking together on the marble floor. It was an instinct, a reaction from the deepest part of his soul. He was no longer a guest of honor at a gala. He was a young lieutenant again, bleeding out in a ditch, saved by a phantom angel with a silver flower on her sleeve. He turned to the stunned, silent crowd. His voice was no longer a whisper. It boomed with the authority of command, filled with a raw, powerful emotion that made the crystal chandeliers tremble. Do you see this woman? He roared, his arm sweeping to indicate Irena. Do you see this jacket you were all whispering about? This is not a fashion statement. This is a uniform of honor, more sacred than anything I have ever worn. He pointed a trembling finger at the patch. This is the mark of the Nightshade Medics, a volunteer unit from the Kenner Ridge conflict. They had no official charter, no support, no recognition. They were civilians, nurses, doctors, medics who walked into the deadliest zones, the places the army itself deemed too great a risk. To save the wounded, they were ghosts. They were legends. We called them the Angels of the Ridge because they came in the dark and were gone by the light, leaving only saved lives in their wake. His gaze swept across the room, landing on Cordelia Blackwood, whose face had turned a sickly, pale white. You judge her for her clothes? This jacket has been through more hell than any of you can imagine. so that boys who wore official uniforms could come home to their families. He turned back to Irana, his expression softening into one of profound gratitude. One of them saved my life. A mortar shell had torn my leg to shreds. I was left for dead, and then there was a shadow, a quiet voice, and skilled hands working in the dark. I never saw a face. I only saw that patch glinting in the moonlight just before I passed out. I woke up at a field hospital, live. He took a deep breath, composing himself, and then he raised his hand to his brow and delivered a slow, perfect, formal salute. It was a gesture of the highest possible respect, from a decorated soldier to a quiet, unassuming woman in a faded jacket. The salute hung in the air, a powerful testament that shamed every snide remark, every arrogant glance. A few other older men in the crowd, their own military pasts hidden beneath decades of civilian life, recognized the weight of the moment and slowly, one by one, also raised their hands in salute. The silence was broken only by a single, choked sob from Cordelia, a sound of her entire superficial world crumbling to dust.